All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to Satsang today. A new setting for Satsang. I'm glad to be in my new place. And remember, Satsang is an opportunity for you to set aside all your thoughts about yourself, all your preconceived notions, your assumptions, everything that you have believed to be true about yourself, and to engage in the most honest and precise exploration into your absolute experience. It's not a theology. It's not a philosophy. It's not an idea. It's not, there are no tenets. It's not an ideology. It is a direct looking. It is a direct seeing. It's learning how to discern between what's actually going on and our story about what's going on. Now, I suspect that anyone who's stopping in to listen to satsang is already aware to some degree that our story about our lives and ourselves don't always match up with what's actually happening. So it behooves us to learn how to distinguish what's actually true. Our stories about ourselves aren't true at all, right? They may bear some little resemblance to the truth, but the story of your life is not the actual reality of your life. And we get locked in the story. We really believe that our interpretation of life is what life really is. And it's not, and it isn't. It's just a story. It's made up. In my inner reconciliation course, I think it's level 2, that I go into great depth about the storyteller mind and the way in which our minds very naturally create stories. They create a view of reality. They literally construct out of nothing an interpretation of experience, because it's simply what minds do. It's kind of it's the way they function. That part of your mind that's whole purpose is to give some kind of order and meaning to what otherwise would be experienced as a chaotic universe. For most of us, that story, as it develops over time, is the truth of us. It never gets questioned. These days, in both personal development, self-help, a lot of psychological practices and the like, that story is being begun to be seen as something not completely trustworthy. But non-dual inquiry takes it all the way to the root. Who are you without the story? That is the question. That is the thing we want to probe. What were you before conditioning took place, before the nervous system got programmed to react in certain ways, before your life took on the shape that it did according to the story? Because the story, what you believe about yourself, literally shapes your perception, and your perception is what you experience. So if we want to experience life being ourselves as we really are, we have to step out of the story. And the only way to step out of the story without substituting another story, which is equally false, is to go to the root, to go back to the way you came, to go back to that essential consciousness that is aware without preference, before the nervous system actually got programmed. That's what satsang is about. And satsang is not just, a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be. It's satsang is your life. Every moment invites us to look carefully at why we choose what we choose. And of course, most importantly, how we see ourselves. Whenever you use that word I, what is it referring to? Well, satsang is a setting in which that's what's on offer here. That's what's for sale here in satsang. And that's actually the only at various levels of people's understanding. I do different things, but in satsang, we have one product on offer. And that is this kind of deep inner inquiry as to who am I? And to learn how to make that inquiry in such a way that it's not made simply intellectually. It's not made with the mind. It's not an attempt to form another picture of yourself. It goes beyond mind. Because direct experience, it doesn't require mind. If you're looking at a beautiful flower, you don't need to have any thought about that flower whatsoever to experience it in its wholeness. As a matter of fact, if you start thinking about the flower, what kind of flowers, boy, that's beautiful. I wonder, I've never seen that before. If your mind starts doing that, you're actually stepping out of the experience and into the dream. You're it's like I see people going to really extraordinary events, and they've got their cameras in front, their phones up, and they're watching it on this little screen. Now, the real thing is happening right there, but they're watching on this little screen. I'm not sure why. Put down your phone, right? That's a perfect example of how the mind wants to make a representation of reality and then live in that representation, which is, of course, interpretive. It's it's a story. It's not the direct experience. You do not need thought to experience directly. And you do not need thought to know yourself. Matter of fact, thought can't know yourself because you're not a thought. You don't want the Kodak moment version of you. You don't want the YouTube video of you. You want to know you as you actually are. So that's why we're here. That's the only reason we're here in satsang. Like, as I said, I have other classes. I've just completely launched my whole new platform with all of my tapping programs. I just put out a brand new tapping video that you all might like. Actually, I will give you a link to it. It's a new video, EFT video. I think you'll get a kick out of it. I had a lot of fun making it. Without further ado, let me just say hello to people and invite any questions you have, especially the questions in regards to the nature of reality. And yes, we're bold enough here to speak in terms of the actual nature of reality and your own personal spiritual journey. I'm interested mostly in those questions that really cut to the heart of you, right? But no matter where your question comes, I will take it back to the deepest place you can possibly go with it. So those of you who are just joining, welcome. And please type in where you're watching from. And if this is your first satsang with me, it's really fun for me to know that. And it also allows me to kind of couch the discussion, especially if you're completely new satsang or non-dual inquiry. So let's see. Let me go. Oh, let me just pick this thing up and put it on my lap. my little trackpad here, so I can. Whoops. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. Sarah Sands, hi G, love being with you all this evening. Please don't forget to talk about EFT programs sometime during satsang. Thank you, Sarah. You're great. You're great. Yes, I have I'll talk. I will talk about it later. I'm sure it'll come up. Because I've decided to do a coaching program. Because a lot of people have asked me about doing EFT. A lot of people have aspirations to become coaches and help others. And the way I do it is pretty unique, and very, very approachable and very, very effective. So I'll be talking about that. Every now and then my screen does kind of go blank. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I don't think you're seeing it. I think it's just on this side here. It's trying to keep up with the camera and the like. So when it blanks, I do pause for a second just to make sure. But I don't think you guys are seeing it on that side. Maybe you are. Anyway, Ursula. Hi, Ursula. Madeira Island, Portugal. John in Ireland. Wow. This is so great. Fanyashi in Norway. Hello, hello, hello. John Watson in Scotland. Georgia B. Hi, GP and all viewing. Georgia from London here. Happy to have made satsang a Sunday evening tradition. That's great. Yes, it's wonderful. And remember what I said, that satsang is about, make a tradition, make a ritual out of mastering this kind of inquiry, because it'll take you all the way to the ultimate freedom. The ultimate freedom is the freedom from who you thought you were, which is pretty amazing. It's a realization of who you actually are outside of the story. And we all got locked in the story. Every single one of us got locked in a story. And everybody's story is different, but the ending's the same. The story ends, and you are revealed in all your beauty and magnificence and wonder as the self. Rosario in Spain, hello, sir. Lisa in the East Coast in the USA. Where we go here? Oh dear. Oh, David and Elaine from Southeast England. Hello, hello to you guys. Andre, greetings from Romania. Hello, everyone. Sue in South Africa. Hi, Sue. Good to have you. Eva, namaste, DG. Happy to be here. Greetings and love from Poland, everyone. Anja in Germany. That follows the link to the new EFT video. Andre has a question. Great. Dear GP, do you think that our detachment from the world in the mind happened because people saw the evil world in the world and could not explain it? Well, we call it evil, right? Which is, and the evil in the world, it's really a misunderstanding. Evil arises from ignorance, and from ignorance arises the entire chain of causation. And the three poisons in Buddhism, which are brilliant, is ignorance, delusion, and greed. And delusion and greed both arise from ignorance, the ignorance as to who you actually are. If by detachment from the world in the mind, there's, you mean a disassociation. And there's a lot of spiritual traditions that just want to renounce the world and back off from it. We can't do that anymore. Yes, there are still ashrams and monasteries you could go and be in. There are mountains you could get to the top of and be there. But that's not the calling for our time now. And so the right kind of detachment or the right kind of renunciation is the renouncing of the false sense of self within yourself, the false view of the world, the samsaric view, as opposed to the nirvanic, if there's such words, view of the world. Early on, I think probably some of the deepest, at the beginning of religious inquiry, was when humans became conscious enough to question, to actually see, become conscious of how life actually works. And when you look at it, it's kind of terrible. Life sustains itself through life. Life eats life. Right? This is the constant transformation of energy. And I think our early ancestors, becoming conscious, began to recognize that, and something inside. I think that's probably a deeper thing that pierces more of the heart than just looking out at the universe and wondering, who am I and all that, which was part of it too. But I think it was much more visceral than that. And out of that grew religion and spirituality, because there was such a recognition that in order for me to live, I had to kill something else. Maybe it was just a plant, but maybe an animal of some sort, which gave rise to me actually giving thanks to the animal, doing rituals to the animal, to recognize my interdependency with this whole thing, and that I eventually would fall to the same fate as those that were keeping me alive. And so they didn't call it evil, right? They didn't see it in those terms. Evil is when that sense of consciousness, within it arose a sense of the egoic mind, which began to what's the word I'm looking for? It began to distance itself from the experience of reality of living, being a human being. It began to create more and more mental patterns, mental ideas, mental concepts that have no bearing in real life. And that's what our world is now. Our political systems, our economic systems, they're all these horrible mental constructs, deeply believed in, that have become completely disassociated with the earth. I mean, if they hadn't become disassociated with the earth, we couldn't be wreaking such havoc on it and such destruction on it, right? You have to become completely detached from it. The same thing, animal agriculture and the like. You have to kill off a part of your own spirit and not see, and simply not see it. You get lost in the mind. And the further away in our abstraction we get from the reference point of simply our interdependency on the earth, the more extreme it gets, the more violent it gets, the more ugly it gets. And that's really what we'd call evil. And we can very easily explain it. I mean, I just did. It is an imaginary point of reference created by the mind, completely a construct of the mind. So it's completely delusional. That's exactly what Buddha meant by delusion as one of the 3 points. It's totally delusional. And yet that's where we are right now. But that's the cause of it. Since that's the cause of it, the solution to it is, of course, the transcendence of ignorance, delusion, and greed within you as an individual. And that's where it has to start. It's not going to be a mass movement or a political movement or some utopian state. It's got to come from the ground up. A groundswell of a shift in values that recognizes evil as what it actually is, a complete disconnection from love and truth and compassion and all the qualities that are truly human. It is a disconnection from that. And so our lives become dedicated to making that reconnection, first in ourselves and then in others. So I hope that adds some insight for you, Andre, into that. And I hope I answered your question to your satisfaction. Ryan, hello, Ryan. Hi, G. What is sense of being? What do I put my attention on to directly experience it? Well, let's just experience it right now, okay? Instead of talking about it, let's actually experience it, because it's not hard, right? You can close your eyes if you like, or you can leave them. It's helpful to close your eyes, and just let your attention naturally begin to sink inward, and just take a couple of deep breaths, right? So that you can begin to just let go of thoughts. Let's first notice where attention is, and that attention is reporting to something. Attention doesn't exist by itself. It must be reporting to some cognizing consciousness. Clearly, that's you, right? Because it's reporting to you, right? So now let that attention just kind of take a couple of steps back and notice that it's aware of thoughts, that the thoughts are appearing in attention, and attention is reporting those thoughts to you. And those thoughts are like images and sounds on a screen. They don't exist independently. Without you there to see them, they simply aren't. And so attention is aware of thoughts, and you're aware of the attention on the thoughts. The same is true if just switch now to your emotions. Whatever you happen to be emotionally feeling right now, good, bad, or indifferent. There's no need to shift the quality of it. Just notice that whatever it is, you're aware of it. And the same is true of sensation. You can feel your body. You can feel the flow of energy that is your body. And now just withdraw a little bit further. And see if you can notice that there's a sense of existence that's more subtle than your experience of sensation, emotion, and thought. In fact, if emotion and thought and sensation all stopped, meaning there was no content whatsoever in your experience, that there would still be a sense of your existence. Can you notice it? That's the sense of being. That is the I am, the pure I am, which is the first manifestation of the absolute being. The absolute being, of course, cannot be sensed. The attention can't be put on it, because if it was, you would be two, not one. So the ultimate perceiver, the absolute being, cannot be perceived. This is the edge of attention, the edge of mind. You are beyond now. But that pure sense of being is not a person. It is not limited. It is not stuck. It has no boundaries or borders. It's just the sense of your own aliveness. So now just take another deep breath and you can open your eyes, and that's the sense of being. Now, that's the I am. That is the sense of I. That's the sense of the concrete, manifest sense of your existence. But again, you are experiencing it. It's very, very subtle. Matter of fact, it is the most subtle thing there is. It is the first manifestation. Beyond that is no experience whatsoever. It is pure being. And that pure being, you're aware of it almost by inference, because something is aware of that sense of being. That you cannot be aware of. That is awareness itself. That is the essential being. If you notice that that is where you always are looking from, then more and more that sense of being will begin to absorb the I thought. And that the I thought will begin to, and increasingly, be referencing the sense of being instead of the ideas in the mind, which is the thought of I. But the thought of I returns to its source, which is the sense I am, which itself is the firstborn of the Absolute. The Absolute, of course, is the Tao. It's unspeakable, it's unknowable, it is beyond all description, it is not perceivable. It can't be known or spoken. It just is. It is, in fact, the only thing that is. Everything else is an appearance of that. Does that help, Ryan? Did you find it? It's not that hard to find because it's you. Notice that you're there. You're the one seeing it, which means you're actually the absolute being. Jay, hi Jennifer, hi Jay, hi Charlie, good to see you. And you're not new, I see that. P.S., hello from Germany, hello to you. Hi Anne, yay, good to see you. Emmer Guri, hi GP. Does your self-image change with awakening? Does it disappear? Or is awakening unrelated to self-image? Awakening is the realization that you are not that self-image. And so, yes, it disappears. You no longer think of that self-image as yourself. It's just a thought. And you realize that it's unreliable. It's shifting and changing all the time. But it's just a thought. So it doesn't really matter. Let it change. Right? Awakening is definitely related to self-image, because prior to awakening, we take the self-image to actually be myself. That which is just an image in the mind is believed to be the actual fact of me. That belief actually conforms consciousness. It wraps around it. And so my experience is that this image of myself is actually true. I feel the limitations of it. I feel the insecurities. I feel the fears. I feel the doubts. I literally inhabited this container and ignorantly thought that's who I am. That's the fundamental ignorance. And awakening is when you see that, oh, it is a self-image. I am the consciousness which mistakenly conformed myself to that self-image, but that image is not who I am. And at that point, the walls of the mind begin to break down, and the awakening begins to move you more and more away from images to what is actually here. So when you look at awakening as a process, it is the it is consciousness divesting itself of self images, which are just images, to discover itself as it actually is, imageless, boundless consciousness. When we describe awakening as a process, it is the moment you realize that who I think I am isn't necessarily who I am. That begins to turn attention away from it. It loses its power. It isn't as sticky as it used to be. And so that process, then we become more habitually oriented towards inward rather than outward, and it begins to grow and expand. And the more we look inward, the more it begins to affect the whole nervous system and self-image. Self-image becomes less and less dominant until what would be called the awakening is when the self-image is simply gone, right? You don't have a self-image anymore. Pictures of yourself arise. What you use you the image on YouTube. If you're watching yourself on a video, yeah, it looks like you, but it's not you. Right? It's just an image of you, and you then want to explore what is not the image. Who am I actually? And when I just did that little meditation for Ryan. You find that you're not a form. You can't make an image of consciousness. Consciousness is imageless. It's like space. You can't picture space. It's too subtle. And consciousness is even more subtle than space. And the absolute is even more subtle than consciousness. And it does end there. So I hope that happens. Yeah, I am noticing periodically that I think it's just the bandwidth thing. I am going to try to upgrade the bandwidth here, but it may be there. But all of a sudden, the screen would freeze. I get the little thing. When that happens, I actually stop and I wait till it comes back. So even though I blank out for a minute, I'm looking right at the screen. So I know when it happens, and I just stop speaking till it comes back. It usually is just a couple of seconds. So you're not missing anything. So Mary just pointed out I'm losing you at times here. Oh, there we go again. Yeah. Sometimes when I go to scroll the questions, it just jumps up way ahead of me. So anyway, Amir, does that answer it for you? And of course, remember, everyone, that when I'm answering somebody's question, really imagine it's your question, right? Because I can't always get to every question that comes up. But believe me, your question is being answered. And especially, the mind's very tricky to try to distract you. You know, somebody asks a question, you may have a question in mind. Well, that's not my question. And it's almost as if the mind starts to tune out. But believe me, every answer is for you. Because we're always talking about the same thing. We're coming at it from all sorts of different angles, but we're always talking about exactly the same thing. And that is, who are you really? Without the story, without the conditioning, without history, without a future, without desire, without preferences, just the pure being of you. That's what we're talking about. And all answers come from there. So it may not seem exactly your question, but it is. Right? So when I'm answering somebody else's question, just focus on that. Linus. Hi, Linus in Germany. Nawaf, good to see you. Nawaf in Saudi Arabia. I think my first listener I've had in Saudi Arabia. So it's great to meet you in person too in our session. That was really wonderful. GP, what are your take on teachings on hell? Yes, coming from Mary, who had one of those fundamentalist upbringings. it's fascinating. The word hell in the New Testament has a different meaning in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, I'm going to focus on, because hell does appear in Buddhism, hell, but they're always talking about states of mind, right? They're always talking about a state of mind, and the state of mind is complete identification with thought. That's hell. It's a um, there's a lot of misunderstanding about desire, and that the Buddha said you shouldn't have any desires, which is not at all what he said. He pointed out that when we seek happiness or contentment or peace in some condition, some circumstance, some attainment, some possession, some state of mind, we are looking for the pony in the dung. There's nothing to be found there. And so what Buddha said was, for something that doesn't exist. Now, if I have a desire and it can never be fulfilled, that is the metaphorical meaning of the fire of hell. The burning desire that is not possible to satiate. The appetite that can never be satisfied. That's why in Buddhism they have the beautiful metaphor of the hungry ghost. And the hungry ghosts are these creatures, they just kind of float around, they're amorphous. They have huge heads and mouths. They have huge bellies, just this tremendous appetite. But their neck is thinner than a human hair. So they can't digest anything. So they spend eternity in insatiable desire. That's hell. Our modern version of it, our modern idea, the hell fire, that's the real meaning of the fire, insatiable desire, to transcend the desires that are insatiable, and transcend the personal identification with desire, which is some sense that this desire is going to fulfill me. The image of the other image of it, which is very, very powerful, the word in the New Testament that Christ used was Gehenna, which got translated into hell. And Gehenna was the garbage dump in Jerusalem, where the fires burned 24 hours a day. They bring all the garbage and they would burn it. So it was obviously the stinkiest place around, right? A perfect metaphor for when he talked about when not knowing who you are, completely absorbed in the egoic mind. It was as if your body was thrown into the hellfire, the Gehenna fire, the junkyard fire, right? Which just burned 24 hours a day and stunk to high heaven. I don't know what happened when Jerusalem got downwind of it. If the wind changed, they must have taken it far enough away. So it's the mental state of being disconnected from yourself, from who you actually are. And we've all felt it. It's suffering. When we desire something that can't be fulfilled, we suffer. And so that's really where it originated. And the devil, interestingly enough, the modern image of the devil with the cloved feet and the horns, the pitchfork, that was based on the god Pan, who was the god of nature. And of course, in that Western tradition, the Abrahamic traditions, nature was fallen. The earth was fallen. The entire thing, because of man's sin, all the earth fell into perdition. And so the god of nature, Pan, became the image of the devil, of Satan, right? And the nymphs and the other beings, Bacchus and all of that, became his henchmen, and the temptresses and the vixens and all of that sort of thing, because of this ridiculous idea that somehow that nature had fallen, right? So anyway, I think I've gone off on it. It's fascinating stuff. But to understand, whenever you feel a sense of discontent, right, that's suffering. That's hell. Right? And to come to see that the source, the actual fulfillment of all discontent is you, the realization of who you actually are. That is the genuine source of happiness. Seeking happiness outside of yourself, you can never find it, and that's hell. That is suffering. That's unrequited desire. So does that do it for you, Mary? Your little scriptural theology lesson for the day. G. Gudeman. Hey, GP, what is the absolute? The absolute is the Tao, that which cannot be spoken. Completely and totally divested of any sense of that is other than you. Notice when I do that meditation that we did, you were here for it, I think. You go beyond thought, you go beyond emotion and sensation. And what's left is just the most subtle sense of your own being. But you recognize, and believe me, just getting to that place of the sense of being, the pure I am, is enough to alleviate suffering, and you can hang out there for a while. But for some of you, you may find yourself noticing that even that very subtle sense of being, the most subtle movement of consciousness there is also being perceived. By what? And that's when you begin to realize that the ultimate perceiver cannot be perceived. In order to have perception, you must have two. There must be something to perceive. The scale can't weigh itself. The knife can't cut itself. Your finger can't touch itself. Why? Because it's one. It's not two. And so the reality of you is simply the I am that prior to even the sense I am, it is the absolute being. Because even before even a sense of I am can arise, or the thought I am can happen, you must be. So prior to any experience is absolute being. And if you just ponder that for a moment, you'll realize that that is where you are looking from. That is the true self, you, the real you. You completely divested of any thoughts of you. You, pure being. You are what is. That's the absolute. That's the best I can describe it. But truth is, you're experiencing it all the time. That is, you are that all the time. That absolute is the ultimate and only perceiver. Thoughts don't perceive themselves, do they? Feelings, emotions, sensations, memories, none of those perceive themselves. You do. And you just keep going deeper and deeper in that until you find the you that is not perceivable, but is the perceiver of all things. And you realize that that is what you've always been. That is always been the ultimate perceiver, simply apparently veiled by beliefs, the belief in a separate self, that the image in the mind, which is being perceived, is actually somebody real. But it's just a thought being perceived. And the perceiver is never in the mind. The mind is always in the perceiver. Does that answer it for you, G? John Sheehan. Hi, GP. Can you explain the origin of and who exactly is dreaming? Many thanks. Well, the origin of everything has to be the absolute being, right? In order for anything to have an apparent existence, there must be something that absolutely is. You've heard me describe it this way before, but modern science, science, the whole scientific method, classical analysis, which started about 3,000 years ago with the Greeks, right? And this fundamental premise that to know something, that what I was perceiving existed independently of my perceptions of it, and that if I could just examine it closely enough, take it apart, I would see it as it actually is. And it was the Greeks who gave birth to the word matter. So if something existed independently of me, it was made of some substance, and that substance is what they called matter. That's what it meant, right? Now, the East had a very different view of it, but we're only talking about this right now. And so began to take things. It's given rise to technology and helped us get out of superstition. But over time, we found that what appeared at this level, when you broke it down into its component parts, they expected to find an indivisible, irreducible thing out of which it was made, right? And so your body looks like a single unit, but in fact it's not. It's an appearance of trillions and trillions of different cells doing different things and coordinated through different means, right? So the body is an appearance of a lower substratum, namely the cells. Well, you keep going. The cells are an appearance of a lower substratum, which is the molecules, which are an appearance of a lower substratum. So at every level, you find an appearance of something else. And so the scientific mind has been searching now for 3,000 years for what is. What isn't an appearance of something else. That is the fundamental, the essential, the irreducible and indivisible. Well, they haven't found it yet. And non-dual inquiry does exactly the same thing, right? It wants to know what actually is. The difference is the scientist assumes that what is something he's looking at, where the non-dual approach is what is the one doing the looking. The consciousness is the origin of the universe. So the origin of everything is what is. And what is simply pure awareness, absolute consciousness. And that consciousness, pondering its own nature, gives rise to the world. Now, the sense I am, which is the firstborn, the first perception, consciousness knowing itself, right? From the I am arises the entire universe, right? Because the entire universe, every object in it is a reflected I am. It's a reflected beingness, right? It is what appears, right? Just like the body and cells and molecules are layers of appearance, even so the universe is the appearance of the self-awareness pondering its own nature. Well, that sense of I am has to happen in order for there to be any experiencing whatsoever, because the ultimate perceiver does not experience, because the reality, you are not, the absolute is not an experience. It is the absolute experiencer. And so it's simply, by its very nature as awareness, it is aware of itself. So the sense I am arises naturally out of the absolute awareness. Now, that sense of I am, within that is the entire universe. And within the sense of I am is simply the focus of attention. That focus of attention is literally what calls into existence all forms. And those forms, of course, are empty. They have no intrinsic existence. They are the appearance of consciousness. So they're made of consciousness. And one of those forms happens to be a perceptual point of view. Without a perspective, a perceptual point of view, right, nothing can exist. You take any object, and we only see an object from one dimension at a time. You can't see it. If you saw every object, every form from all dimensions simultaneously, you wouldn't see it at all. It would simply disappear. The only way a universe can appear is that consciousness conforms its attention to a single point of view. That point of view is what we call the identifier is the dream and the dreamer. The absolute doesn't dream. It is simply witnessing the dream and the dreamer, which are one. This isn't a mistake because this is how consciousness tastes existence. It loses itself in that experience, and then at some point tires of it and wants to return home. But it's gotten lost in it, so it has to find its way back. This is what Christ meant in the story of the prodigal son. He exhausted experience and was done and wanted to return to the house of his father, his source. And so suffering eventually arises to remind consciousness it's just a dream, and inspire it to turn around and start heading backwards once again. And that's already happened. That's why you're here in Satsang. It's already happened in you. You've already lost the taste for it. You're already wanting to return home. And that's the journey back to the absolute. Does that answer it for you, John? It's a very in-depth explanation of the whole thing. I just went over the entire cosmology. But the one who is dreaming is in the dream. And the pure I am consciousness is the ultimate dreamer, you might say. But the absolute is beyond all dreaming. Everything, in a sense, is the dream of consciousness, because nothing exists independently of consciousness. Everything is a product of consciousness. And just like your dream at night, everything in it is you. Everything in it is simply you reflecting you. And while you're in the dream, you're totally in it. It's your reality, right? And you want it that way. Lucid dreams are rare, right? And so you want to have it that way because that's how you taste it. You're fully in it. And this is no different. This is consciousness in the dream. And then consciousness, the true sense I am, gets tired of the dream and wants to go home, which is the state we're all in here. So welcome home. And the Father welcomes you back with opened arms, as if you've never left. Because you haven't. Because you haven't gone anywhere. Because you are the absolute. And that's the rediscovery, the pure joy of the rediscovery of your own being. So how's that, John? John in Ireland. Still want to get to Ireland very soon. Andre, great answer. Thank you. You're welcome. Good. Dave and Elaine. Thought suggests that self-realization takes place in time, i.e., it may be gradual process or spontaneous, but isn't it in fact timeless? And it is the mind which is bound by the dimension of space and time, which subsequently interprets in this way. Many thanks. Yes, very good. Yeah. I'm having a hard time actually finding any flaws in you guys, Dave and Elaine. Yes, the awakening is simply the reality of being that always is. And consciousness experiences awakening as a story in time. But in fact, it's the awakening as a process is in the dream. There's no actual awakening for the absolute. It is awakeness that simply recognizes itself. And so the story of awakening is quite beautiful. And you'll have your own personal story of awakening, your own Buddha story. Right? That's what Buddha meant when he referred to the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. That's consciousness re-experiencing itself and the utter joy of it. So in fact, it is timeless, right? You know, the being is timeless and dimensionless. Right? There's no space or time for being. It just is. You're completely within being, right? You're not in a universe that it was created by or inhabited by the infinite being. There is no universe. The universe is the mind of God. It just is. Right? So even space is a construct. There has to be space in order to be form, and there has to be form in order to be space. That's the continuity between space and form. So space just gives form a place to be, right? But all of it, like your dream at night, you can see huge vistas, right? You can even fly above them and go around the entire world, but you haven't gone anywhere. None of it's, there is no actual space there. Right? This is the reality. There is no space. All of this is images in the mind of God. And God is the word for the I am. And beyond the I am is the absolute. So you got it absolutely correct. Now, inhabit the timeless. I invite you, the two of you, to inhabit the timeless. Right? The only way you can witness time, and you can say it's a gradual process, that you can note time, cognize time, is that you aren't in time. You're outside of time watching it. The field of time is simply an appearance within the timeless, spaceless reality. And so who are you, right? Who is it that's witnessing the mind? The mind is, of course, bound by time, right? It's bound by time and space, but without time and space, there's no experience, there's no form, there's no events, there's no history, there's no dance, there's no music, right? All of these things happen within time, but time is simply a construct in an appearance within the timeless, which is, and seeing this, where are you? Are you in time or are you in the timeless? You aren't even in the timeless. You are the timeless, experiencing itself in time. And so the infinite nature of being is unfolded and known in space and time. So, does that answer it for you, David and Elaine? Who are you? Who are you? Who's the one looking? Sends me to, hey, GP, you look fab. That's great to hear. Thank you. Everybody is enjoying my new setup here, my new scene. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot too. It took a while. It took 2 days to get this all set up and working correctly. I was exhausted by the time I was done, but it has turned out very, very nicely. Where am I? So thank you for that. Thank you for that. I feel fab. Nawaf, hey GP, do we have free will or is it an illusion? Um, it depends on the perspective that you take. And I always like to approach this question very gingerly and with precision, because it's one of those things that gets thrown about in spiritual teaching, especially non-dual teaching that's immature. You just say there's no free will, right? There, and just kind of blow it away. It depends on which dimension from which you're looking at it. I describe it usually in three levels. On the level of pure conditioning, right? Shirt down here. On the level of pure conditioning, right? Before there's any sense of self-awareness or any sense of consciousness, when everything is just reactive, right? Like an animal, right? It's all purely instinctual. It's all reactive. It's just the nervous system has conformed itself to an environment. And so there's no conscious thought yet there. It's totally robotic. Consciousness begins to emerge. And by consciousness, I mean a certain intuitive sense of separation between my experience and myself. And it happens in people oftentimes before they even know what's happened. Right? It's happening really quite universally these days. This is why people can talk about changing their conditioning. And we have things like neuroplasticity now, which are all a result of consciousness freeing itself from conditioning. And so at this point, when I am no longer subject to my condition, I'm seeing conditioning as conditioning. There's a certain sense of free will and choice where I can look at that and I can say, I can feel the impulse to simply react according to my conditioning. But now consciousness is here and going, no, this doesn't, it's discriminating now that this doesn't really serve me. This is mindless. And there's a sense of choice that in fact feels that is very real. But this is consciousness expanding into discrimination to see that which is conscious and that which is not. Now, it feels like a choice, right? And so on this level, I would say, yes, and in some, depending on who I'm talking to, I might say with consciousness, you get the ability to choose. Without consciousness, you're purely robotic. But there's a dimension beyond that. When we begin to examine carefully, really in detail, the actual act that we call choosing, what we find is that there is this discrimination. There is a moment where one direction or another needs to be chosen, that there's a choosing thought that arises. So I'm going to go this way, and it speaks in first person. But looking very, very closely at it, you find that while you can see clearly the arising of the choosing thought, when you look prior to that, you can't find a chooser. The chooser is an assumption about myself. It's an inference. It is the preconceived notion that I am somebody choosing. But when you look really carefully, you can't actually find a chooser. You can only find a choosing thought. And then you start going more deeply into it until you find that you are not that one you assumed yourself to be, that this discriminating principle is really the broader sense, the I am. And then you find that free will is an illusion of the sense of a separate self. Now, notice I took all the steps there, because depending on what level you're speaking to someone at, right, you don't want to speak to somebody at a level they can't go. You address them at that level, and then you try to take them a step or two deeper. So somebody completely stuck in the robotic reactions, I want to liberate them. I want them to recognize there's a consciousness there that's capable of actually discriminating between the robotic instinctual, and the spiritual and more conscious, and to make choices, better choices, clear, more compassionate choices. Because when that happens, we naturally become more intelligent, more creative, more compassionate, because all of the evil, all of the nasty stuff is all robotic. That's all, and the ego is just the robotic mind. And so eventually that whole thing gets subsumed into the reality of your being. And the reality, the absolute awareness creates, but the creation just happens. It is not an act of will or volition. It is simply its nature. It is the nature of awareness to be aware. And there's only one thing it can be aware of, and that's itself. And that self-awareness is the I am. Right? So does that clarify it for you, Nawaf? Especially on, I know you want to be to teach this. This is a very helpful way to be able to read that, or just move the needle a little bit. Zen Smita. When I closed my eyes, oops, I don't hear anything, and you can't see my face. I see myself as turned with her against me, but always looking outside a window and watching. Let me see if I can discern that. What does a thought look like? Well, the thought looks like however the thought appears in your mind. That's it. And it looks, right? It is something being seen. So it's appearing on this screen of consciousness. I see myself with my back turned against me, and I don't see the face. That is correct. You can never see your own face, right? Really, if you look at your own experience, you don't have a face. You don't have a head, right? That's the whole head this way from Douglas. I never remember his last name. Douglas Harding. Well, I can't say never anymore. I did remember it. And so you don't see the face. And so the face that you hold as a thought, right, is nothing you've actually experienced. That's hearsay. That's an outside image. Your experience of yourself is simply empty consciousness. That's what you actually experience if you just stop for a minute and look at it. Now, of course, we believe very strongly that I am this body and this is my face. And so your direct experience and your beliefs contradict each other. And this is where we have to develop the internal authority to say, oh, that was a belief. That's not my actual experience. My experience is I'm nothing but consciousness. And there's this consciousness that is aware of it, in which an entire universe is appearing. That's my actual experience. That's your actual experience. I can still see myself standing and watching. Can you give metaphor? Let's see here. Okay, that's the bottom. Okay. Yeah, well, you're seeing yourself standing and watching, but that's just an image in the mind, isn't it? That's not your actual experience. So I'm not going to give you a metaphor. I'm going to give you the real experience, right? The metaphor is like a dream, right? You have an image in the mind, right? And you've mistaken that image for yourself. So to fully be free of the content, you take your attention off of the content and put it on the perceiver of the content. Now, what do you know about the perceiver? If you take out all of the content, what's left? You're here, but as what? You're perceiving, but as what? Right. Obviously, if I can perceive it, it's not me, because I can't directly perceive myself. right? That is, I can't perceive myself as one thing knowing another. The way I would, I'm looking at this screen, and you're looking at the screen that you see me on, right? So that's a subject-object relationship. But when I'm trying to see myself, I can't do it through that means. That's Vedanta. That's the end of knowledge. Right? The normal knowledge we use every day, which is very useful, subject-object relationship, right, is that's the end of it. It can't go beyond this point. Right? So the mind stops, because that's all the mind is the description of one thing in terms of something else. It's purely subject-object relationship. In non-dual inquiry, we go beyond the subject-object relationship. And at that point, you can simply let go of all the content, because all of the content is describing you as an object. That is how you appear to someone else. How do you appear to yourself? So you see yourself standing and watching. No, you see an image that you've associated yourself. You don't actually see yourself standing and watching, ever. You always are the one seeing. And to fully be free of the content is to let go of that image as yourself. That you are the imperceivable perceiver, right? And subject-object knowledge stops now. Now, how do I know myself? If it's not subject to object, how is it that I know that I am? When I'm not externally referencing it from some point. Well, you just know, don't you? Nobody has to tell you. This is direct knowledge. Nobody's telling you. You just know you are. How do you know? Right? And you see what happens is knowing and being converge. And you find they're not two. Knowing is being. Knowing is not an attribute of some being. Knowing is being. Sat Chit Ananda. They're one, not two. This is Advaita Vedanta. Vedanta, the end of knowledge, the discovery of not two. Being and knowing are one. Being, knowing, and bliss, happiness are one. Oh, thank you for that, Sansmeet. I hope I answered your question as best I could. Ryan, how much meditation is necessary for abiding awakening? None. Yeah, dear friend, don't turn this into a practice. The moment you turn it into practice, the mind's got you again. Because now it's always going to be holding the carrot out. Oh, just a little bit further, a little bit more meditation. 2 hours a day now. That'll do it. It's always going to hold something out. So I'm not going to say how much meditation. How much? None. You already are who you are. So when I do meditations, it isn't a practice. It is an exploration. You are looking and seeing. So like the meditation we did right at the beginning of this, I took your attention. I just took attention. First, we just closed our eyes. We're with the breath. So attention comes inward. Then we move it back even further to notice that it's noticing thoughts. It's noticing feelings and sensation. Move a little bit further back and we notice that it is just, there is this sense of being. Now, if you notice that there's something even aware of that sense of being, in that location, which is now beyond any place the mind can go, you simply pose the question, who am I? Who is this I that is the ultimate perceiver? So this kind of a meditation is an inquiry. It is an exploration. It is not a practice so that you basically master a skill, right? So now I can meditate for 2 hours and I can hold my attention. I can get into samadhi. All of that's very nice, but it's not non-dual inquiry. It is, and it's quite a distraction, right? So any practice to acquire a skill or to master something, right, is not what I teach. It's not what we do here. Meditation becomes a deep pondering of yourself. With the only intent is to know myself as I actually am. And the very fact that you're listening to me and you're still here, we did the meditation at the beginning and you're still here, means that you've already awoken to some degree, right? And again, you can look at awakening as a timeless event, which is kind of which is kind of an oxymoron, right? Or you can see it as this process by which you're discriminating quite clearly what's me and what isn't. So as you bring your attention more consistently to this place beyond which the mind can't go, that very act will be all sorts of things by the very nature that your focus of attention is right on the border of the ultimate reality. And as you continue to bring attention there, right, you will begin to have the experience of abiding more there. Now, how long in terms of time before the ultimate self-realization takes place? No one can say. It's purely a matter of grace. But just coming to the place of knowing the pure I am is enough for the end of suffering. Because all suffering is in the mind. And as disidentification from the mind deepens, so does suffering end. Reactive patterns, programmed responses, all of those things fall away. And at that point, you're already in a state of deeper contentment and peace. And then it's simply, do you want to keep going? Well, keep going, right? Till the ultimate self-realization. But nobody can say when that is. That was when it meant when the disciples asked Christ, when will you be coming? What's the signs of the return of the Son of Man? And that's exactly what it's talking about, the return of the I am to its source, right? That's what he meant. He said, I go unto my Father. This is what he was referring to. And he said, well, when will it be? He says, no man can say, only the Father, right? So at this point, the beauty of it is that at that point, all effort stops. It's pure grace. There's nothing more you can do. There's no more effort, right? Even effort is gone. So meditation is no longer a practice. It's an effortless, spontaneous happening in and of itself. And that is the place from which the happens. Does that do it for you, Ryan? Beautiful question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Daryl, speaking of a story, isn't the thought that we are not the story still a story? Yep, but it's a whole lot better one. Yeah, notice that in absolute terms, yes, because the story only belongs in the relative, right? But speaking relatively, to see the story as a story is consciousness. That's self-awareness, right? If I mistake the story for myself, that's ignorance. That's unconsciousness. So to see the story as a story is an awakening. Then to see that the main character of the story is the story, right, is a deeper awakening. Because we can get the idea, oh, I'm living a story, but the I has not yet been questioned. We can see our delusions. We can see the stories we've made up about our lives, but looking more deeply, we haven't really questioned the I, the main character. every story has a setting, a plot, and a main character, right? And it all revolves around the main character. So that main character is the essential ingredient in the story. That is the story. So moving beyond the story, which is a great step, right? When I realize that I'm acting out a story, my life can become functional, right? It explains a lot of self-sabotage and things that are happening that seem kind of out there. Lives become more balanced, they become more centered, right? But the I hasn't been questioned yet. But so that's the next step. Well, who's this I in that appears to be having the story, that appeared to be dysfunctional and now is functional? Who is that? Keeps just going. It keeps going. It keeps going, right? Until finally you hit the pay dirt, that which is not a story. Because it doesn't matter how many levels of illusion there are, there's something there, right? Right? Something actually exists. There has to be. Finding what is what this is all about. We are finding what is, not what appears. And you oh, I am. I am. I take away all the illusion, anything. Even if I'm in the middle of total illusion, there's something here being deluded, right? I may be mad as a hatter. I may be in an institution somewhere thinking I'm doing YouTube as a guru, right? Or I could be sound asleep on another planet dreaming I'm a human being, right? Who knows? We can't judge from our perceptions. So what do I know for sure? Well, it doesn't matter how deluded I might be. Something is there that's real. Deluded, but real. It's got to be something there to have an illusion, right? So what do I clue in on? I go through thought, emotion, sensation, even the sense of being, and I'm left with what? Me. I'm here. I am. You get it? You are what is. It's so simple. It's me. Oh, it's me, which is the other name for I am. Me. It appears as Emmer and John and Mary and Daryl and Ryan. That's what it appears at. But it's just the I am, the only I am there is. And that's the end of the story. Fade to black, the end. Amen, brothers and sisters. Mary says, thank you, GP. You're so welcome. John, brilliant, GP. You helped me so much. Thanks. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm so glad to be able to do this. This is so wonderful. This is so wonderful. There's nothing better than inviting people into awakening. David Lane, many thanks, GP. We just love the eloquence, depth, and beauty of your answers. They always resonate so deeply here. Oh, thank you. You're very kind. You're very kind. It is I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. and I always like to make the point that the vehicle through which this is coming is not the source of it. This aging body, right, is not the source of wisdom, right? The I realized that it is not this body, and is continuing to complete the journey home. And so the same place that the answer is coming from in depth and eloquence is this very same place in you, right? When you go beyond experience, thought, emotion, and sensation, and even beyond the sense I am, the sense of of two just drops away. There aren't two there. There can't be. It's not a person. It is the infinite I, the I principle. And so it's you. I am you. You are me. Now, you can't grasp that when we've identified with the body. So there's a lot of people who talk about oneness, and they're trying to make two one. You can't make two one. The two dissolves, and you find that there aren't two, right? And that the one has an infinite number of faces, or infinite faces on the same soul. And so that which is speaking, that which appears to be wisdom, is what is recognizing the wisdom. Truth recognizes itself. So you can see this, you resonate with it, but it's not me. That is, it's not this form, right? The actual I am animates this just as it does you. It just, I know myself more as that than this, maybe more than you do. And that's the only difference. The I removes the I and yet remains the I. It's the most beautiful way of putting it. Because the I, the true I, removes the I, but still remains I. It doesn't become an abstraction. You know, there's a lot of people who think of the absolute, there's nobody here, there's nothing, right? As emptiness, as being nothingness, void, right? It's not. It's me. it is the person completely impersonalized. I don't know how to, it's still very personal, right? It's still very much me, but it's the infinite me. But it's not abstract. It's not God on high, right? It's me. It's you. It's us, we, and transcendent of all of that. And so a companion with myself. It's not that I'm sitting alone for eternity, smoking, bored. I experience myself as many. That is the beauty of it. That is the depth, the intimacy, the sweetness of love, is that it's essence. It's the one being knowing itself. It's beyond description. It's so perfect. Amir, I love the idea of meditation as exploration. Yes, that's different than most people talk about meditation. It's just kind of the Western mind process and practice to get a result, right? Whereas genuine meditation isn't about results. It's about discovering what's actually here, right? That's not results. That's not a practice in the sense of an accomplished or acquired skill, right? Those are valuable, right? I've learned how to play musical instruments. Matter of fact, after 40 plus years of not playing drums, I just really had the urge to hold a pair of drumsticks again. So I bought a practice pad and some drumsticks. Just absolutely loving it. It's an exploration, right? Just an experience, right? I'm experiencing just the pleasure of being. But who's the I that's actually experiencing the pleasure of being? That's the absolute I, the only I there actually is. What is the I principle. The I principle is you. Ryan, and says, Mita, thank you so much, you guys, for the donations. I guess I should mention that. Well, actually, Sarah told me to do it. Told me to do it because I have just finished the whole catalog of the stuff I do on EFT. So if any of you are interested in EFT, and I do use it even in spiritual way, part of the job as spiritual teacher is also healer. right? I'm here to alleviate suffering, and working with the human nervous system through various means. That's why I use the emotional freedom technique, tapping, which is a variation of acupuncture, right? So, um, anyway, the whole catalog is now available. All the courses I've done that have to do with EFT, and I'm also realizing I want to help others help others. I'm going to be in July. I'm going to be doing a coach training program, be an intensive 6 weeks where I'm going to teach you how to work with others using the emotional freedom technique as a coach. If you don't really want to be a coach, but you want to deepen your experience of that works too. But it is aimed at a level that's for more advanced. It's not really for the beginner. At any rate, where do I have that somewhere? The tab, yeah, right there. This is that's the entire program. You go to there, and everything I have available about EFT is now available, and little discounts and stuff like that, because I'm trying to move all of my courses over, and I've priced keep all this going. I have a few things, but I don't sell T-shirts. Maybe I should sell some non-dual T-shirts. There's nobody here. Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. Anyway, but thank you guys thank you so much for your donations. It really does. They really do keep me going. So, Daryl said, "My goodness, I thought I knew the answer, but you just rocked my world." I love you, GP. I love you too, Daryl. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this wonderful when we have an answer, but we're open, right? There's an answer that's satisfying to a certain level of understanding, but we're open, that somehow all of a sudden the bottom can drop out and we find ourselves in a whole new perception. I mean, this is the beauty of the constant unfolding of wisdom. And yes, there's a point at which the illusion is gone and you know yourself as you are, but the unfoldment of that does not stop. It's not like, I'm done now, I know who I am. No. The I know who I am is infinite. The I am is infinite, and creates universe upon universe upon universe. And this knowledge, the self-knowledge, is that this universe is this ever unfolding reality, this ever unfolding manifestation of the infinite potentiality, which is inexhaustible being, reflected in inexhaustible forms over inexhaustible time and space. It never ends, right? It's not like you get somewhere. I once saw a Gary Larson cartoon of this guy. Obviously, he was in heaven. He was sitting on a cloud. He had a little halo over him and a lyre in his hand. He's going, "Gee, I really wish I had brought some magazines." It's not that. Heaven's not this place where suddenly, right? It is just this inconceivable, infinite unfoldment of the knowingness of the self. So again, thank you for your donations, guys. Ryan, I find it difficult to set aside the content of experience in order to notice pure being. Body sensations seem to cover it up. Any tips for setting aside in order to see clearly? Yes, very much. Wherever, you're withdrawing your attention to the point where you're aware of body sensations, right? Good. Excellent. So you just stay there, right? I'm supposed to go further, right? Don't let that thought enter in your head, right? Also, don't let the thought say, "I find it difficult." Who's that I? Are you finding it difficult to just be aware of your sensations? Then just be aware of your sensations and notice that you are aware of being aware of your sensations. It's all you have to do. Don't turn it into a quest. Keep it as a discovery. Okay, I'm at this point. I sometimes I get overwhelmed with thoughts. Okay, and then just notice the thoughts and the sense of overwhelm, and that too is being perceived, right? And just keep coming back there. Keep coming, and little by little, right? Or maybe all of a sudden, you'll find that this is where you are, right? And then it can go a little more subtle and a little more subtle until you finally run out of subtle, right? And that which is beyond even subtle, right? Which is you. So, uh, so first up, don't believe your mind telling you this is difficult. I find this difficult. Who's that I? That's an interesting thing to look at all by itself. Who's the I that's saying this is difficult? It's just a thought. Is it really difficult? Are you not aware of those thoughts? And is being aware of those thoughts difficult? And could that thought arise if you weren't there to be aware of it? So everything depends upon you being aware of it. So if you happen to notice the strategy is notice that you are aware of those bodily strategies, or bodily sensations that seem to cover it up. And notice that even the covering you're aware of. So the awareness hasn't been covered up. It's only the attention and the interpretation of the mind that's active. So it's okay. The attention is still a little bit weak now. And so you're having a hard time bringing the attention away from the sensations. Fine. That's where you are. Just stay there. Don't make an issue out of it, but notice. I see. Right. Okay. Got it. Got it. I'm just aware of those sensations. And then you can ask the question, to whom are these sensations appearing? That to try to turn in more deeply. It might not be able to at first. That's okay. Remember, our attention has been focused outward our whole lives, right? And so we're now bringing it into to become attentive to that which is incredibly subtle. The sensations are very much there, but we don't notice the awareness of the sensations and how essential that is. And then we don't notice that we're aware of that awareness, that we're actually sitting here on this side of the lens. And all of this is happening on the other side of the lens. So don't believe that thought that says it's difficult, because you're already doing it, right? So don't get pulled into that story. How am I doing it? I can't do this. Just again, this isn't a practice. It isn't a discipline. It's an observation. It's an exploration. You're doing a direct looking. I see. I am aware of these sensations. Okay, this is good. Now let's bring that attention away a little bit more from the sensations. And the attention may just glom right back onto them again. The sensations could get more intense, right? It's okay. It's okay, right? No matter how intense it gets, or no matter what the mind says, aren't you there aware of it? You just keep bringing yourself back. Oh, yes, that's right. I'm aware of it. And I'm not veiled. It's talking about it's veiling. These sensations are veiling. Well, I'm not veiled. I'm sitting here aware of the veil. So what's it veiling? Not me. Just keep working at it. God, you're doing so well. You're all doing so well. This is like really, really pleasing for this little guy. Sensmita. Why in non-Western thought, me is infinite, but still measurable, paradoxical? The sense me is not infinite. right? Right. Time out. There's a very subtle sense I am, which is formless, right? That sense I am, and I say the me because I want to bring you to it. I don't want it to be an abstraction. People talk about pure consciousness as if it was this thing out there, right? It becomes very clinical. And I want to make it very personal without creating a person, right? It's me, right? That sense of I, right, is you. Right? And of course, that sense of I is boundless. The sense of I here is the same sense of I in you. It's the same sense of I in the plants around me, in the birds, right? Every sentient being is a sense of I. Maybe even the insentient, right? You just don't know how to detect it, right? Even the stone, which is just another form, probably has there's a sense of I there. I don't know. I do know that I do and you do. And everything that is sentient does have a sense of I. It's the same sense of I. And that sense of I it's boundless, right? Which means infinite. It has no limits. It has no border. It has no beginning or end, right? So it's not measurable in that sense. Now, the sense of I manifests itself in form. It reflects itself in form. The way, composer, you hear a piece of music from Beethoven, it's Beethoven, right? Now, he's not in that piece of music. If he was, he'd get into one music and then he couldn't get out again, right? There would be no other music from Beethoven, right? But everyone has his energetic signature on it. Well, ultimately, you go past Beethoven, you find the ultimate consciousness that has manifested in the energetic signature of Beethoven, which then manifests itself further as the energetic signature in every bit of work, which is clearly, noticeably him. And of course, we recognize genius as that which is uniquely them, right? It's not borrowed. It is them. You see them brilliantly and perfectly reflected there. And so that experience, the manifest, is measurable, but that's how the infinite becomes measurable, right? Because it's still the infinite. Beethoven was an infinite theme, wasn't it? There was no limit to it. It just ended, right? It could have kept going. Matter of fact, it was. I listened to, I studied music, so I listened to his 10th violin quartets. And the violin quartets is where he tried out a lot of the stuff that ended up in his symphonies. So there was going to be a 10th symphony, right? That never happened because, basically, like Vince Lombardi just ran out of time, right? The individual form that you call Zensmita, or I call GP, is itself an infinite theme reflecting the immeasurable. Are you following that? Right? That every individual is themselves an infinite theme, manifesting an energetic signature that is that unique signature of every individual. Every individual form is itself a manifestation of the infinite, immeasurable essence. So the infinite reflects itself in infinite. I mean, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? Right? So even the form, once it has been divorced from the sense of being a person, is itself infinite. The theme of Zensmita has no limits on how it can express itself and will always give that signature. That's how the infinite one reflects itself in the individual one. The universal and the particular are not two. Thank you for asking that question, because I haven't actually talked about that theme, which is the infinite value of the individual, right? The individual, once it is the sense of being a person has dissolved, the individual becomes infinite. The individual is liberated because you're not the individual, but the individual is the vehicle of expression. Without it, there's no expression. So, since me, okay, so you're referring to me as in manifestation, like reincarnated, maybe? What I'm saying is that the I, the infinite I, manifests itself as an individual I. And that's the manifestation that you'd say is me. But the ultimate me is not the manifestation. That's the appearance. The ultimate me is what is the infinite, indescribable, inconceivable self. But the self manifests itself in infinite selves because there's no limit to the infinite. The infinite doesn't divide itself up. The individual is not a part of the infinite. It is the infinite. It is the infinite known. And so when I say I'm not referring to you as the manifestation, I'm saying that the manifestation of you and the reality of you are one. Right? So, so the manifestation is not separate from the actual I, the true I, the I principle, which is the only reality. And Daryl says, yes, 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 I'm in tears. Yes, isn't it amazing? It never ends. No, it doesn't end. Oh, Ryan, thank you again. That's so generous. Jay said, the womb is empty with potential. It's amazing, a new life form taking manifestation. Yes, that's one of the significances of the goddess. The womb represents the emptiness. The womb is empty, right? And yet it brings forth all life. It's the most magnificent, magnificent thing, right? And it, which is very telling because Western religions, the Abrahamic religions, which is Christianity, well, Christianity is made by the Roman and Judaism and Islam, not Sufi, not the mystical strain of Islam, are all based on Yahweh, who was the only God in any system or culture that didn't have a goddess. And so the male became the creator, right? I mean, Yahweh is the image of the ego. Wrathful, vengeful, jealous, trite, petty, right? The usurper. I'm the creator, right? That's kind of the whole male ego, right? Once men found out that that sperm actually contributed to babies happening, they imagined little people, that the sperms were actually little people, actually warriors with shields and stuff. Weird. Very, very weird. But at any rate, why in the world was I going off on that? I was back up here. I covered it up. That's why. So the goddess represents the womb of being. And Prajnaparamita in the Heart Sutra is characterized as the womb of all Buddhas. It's so beautiful. The goddess Kanon, which is the goddess both of wisdom and of compassion, is the womb of all Buddhas. It is from this womb that the wisdom that you hear in Satsang emerges. It is from that emptiness, which is the pure potential for everything and anything. And yet that anything and everything always reflects the love and beauty of its source. And so the ultimate absolute is both masculine and feminine. It is both male and female. You know, even said that God created man in his image and likeness. In the image and likeness of God created he them, male and female created he them. The infinite transcendent one manifests as the male and female, with the infinite potential for the intimate, representing the infinite intimacy of that unity of the one. Whew. Let's see what time it is. A little bit longer. Hendrik, amazing satsang. Thank you. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Yeah, it's wonderful what unfolds, isn't it? Dick McClutsky, you look familiar, sir. Or no, new. I think you're new. I don't think I've seen you here before. Anyway, welcome. How do you know when you're meditating right? Well, as you become increasingly aware of being aware, there's less a decreasing interest on what you are aware of and an increasing interest in the awareness itself, right? Then it's having its effect. The other effect it'll have, more external, will be less reactivity, because the programmed conditioning is falling away, which it will. The more you're sensitive to the inner world of awareness, the more programmed conditioned stuff begins to fall away. You'll find yourself slow to react, sometimes, even to the point where nothing bothers you at all. Stuff that used to doesn't anymore, and eventually nothing bothers you, right? So, you're new. Good. Glad to have you. So, for me, meditation is not a practice to acquire something or to get some skill or to master something. It's an inquiry. It's an inner exploration. We're simply meditating to see what is actually here, right? So I start by simply closing my eyes, focusing my attention on the breath, and just noticing the breath, slowing it down and the like. And what that does is start to bring the attention inward, out from its normal engagement with the world and the stuff that's going on, which is important. But in meditation, we're going somewhere else. We're going in. Then you notice that you're aware of the breathing, right? That there's an awareness there. And that's a discovery, right? It's not a practice. You're not trying to make it happen. You simply notice that, yes, I am aware of the breathing. There's something very subtle that is aware. And then you just extend it. You look at thought. Thoughts happen. Normally, we're very engaged with thoughts. And that habit of being engaged with thoughts can continue. But you notice that I'm looking at the thoughts. There's something subtle there that's aware of thought. You go through emotion, it's the same thing. And even the sensations in the body, which are constantly flowing, yet there's this awareness of it. And now, noticing that there's an awareness of it, attention begins to naturally withdraw even more from sensation, emotion, and thought, which is the sum total of experience, and begins to try to see what is aware of those things. And again, notice, this isn't a practice. This isn't an attempt to acquire a skill. This isn't trying to go into samadhi. This is simply seeing what's actually here. And so attention becomes more focused inward, right? Less attached to thought and stuff. Now, at first, it might be very difficult, right? Because we're so used to immediately going to thought and experience. But little by little, this becomes increasingly interesting, right? And so that just keeps going. So as long as you are wanting to see what's here and noticing these subtle things, you're meditating right. And that is the way I teach meditation. Now, there are other forms that are more about skill and acquiring and relaxing the nervous system and that sort of thing. But this meditation is not results oriented. It's an exploration, not an acquired skill. So hopefully that answers it for you, Dick, and welcome. So glad to have you. Taskatu, namaste. Can you please tell Fuse struggle example which comes when try to realign mind feelings with new recognition? It takes so long time, and mind tries everything to resist, to intimidate. Yes, it does. But remember, mind isn't a thing, right? It's not somebody there. The devil isn't a creature, right? They're just ready to get you, hiding in the bushes. The ego isn't a thing. They're thought patterns. And the thought patterns have grown strong with momentum simply because they've gotten so much attention. We've been feeding them quite well with great nourishing food, right? And so there's a lot of habit energy. Just closing your mind and putting your attention on the breath removes attention from the mind, which is constantly wanting to engage with the external world. The moment you do that, you will feel resistance. The resistance isn't a personal problem. You're not doing anything wrong. You are simply experiencing internally in the body this habit energy of outward focus. So just breathe, right? If it's a struggle to like separate yourself from your mind, just breathe. Just consciously slow down your breath and deepen it. Right? You can even chant a mantra. Right? Om Mani Padme Hum or Soham. Muji just did a beautiful mantra today. You guys can look it up. And it's just pure awareness. I am. Pure awareness, I am. Pure awareness, I am. Om. Pure awareness, I am. So those things help too, right? You will eventually outgrow the need for those, but there are times, even in my mind, so much is going on, and I'll just stop, put my attention to my breath, I'll just so hum or om, just to, just okay, it's okay, mind. I know you're all excited. That's fine. Right? But I'm little by little, the mind will lose its power because the more your attention goes away from it, the less power it has because your attention is what fed it. And we've given it a lot of great attention. We believed all its stories, gotten all wrapped up in it. So at that point, the more you do that, the more the natural inner awareness will begin to realign stuff. It's not like you have to consciously do it, right? It'll just start happening. It'll just start beginning to seep more into the nervous system with less attention on the mind and an increasing attention on the self. The nervous system, all the feelings and sensation will begin to reorganize themselves around that. So be very gentle and patient with yourself. One of the things the mind loves to do, it gets very resistant and then blames you for the resistance. Oh, it's really hard. You can't do this. You're not very good at this, are you? You can just, all of that's thought, isn't it? And just keep reminding yourself, I'm aware of my thoughts. So I'm not my thoughts. I'm something else. I don't know what that is, but I'm clearly the one aware of it. And then consciously choose to redirect your attention. And the best place to start, the simplest place to start is just your breath. Because it's anchored here in the body, it's in this present moment. It's not in the past or the future. It's what's happening right now. And that's that. And when you center yourself in this present moment, you have stepped outside of the mind. Let the mind will for a while. Don't worry about it. Right? Really, don't concern. John M., can you speak on personal development in regards to the non-dual teaching? Well, personal development is fine, right? It's good. It's better to have a humble ego than an arrogant one. It's better to be functional than dysfunctional. But it only goes so far. It's based on an improving the person, which is fine, right? But non-duality has nothing to do with that. It's not about improving the person. It's about seeing that the person doesn't actually exist. And from that perspective, self-improvement or personal development on the person is like giving medicine to a ghost. If I see that it doesn't exist, the story that I had associated with the person begins to dissolve, and I don't have to improve it anymore. Again, notice I'm not criticizing or condemning it. I'm saying that non-duality subsumes personal development. It's a higher place from which to see it, right? But personal development is still very useful. I teach personal development techniques. Sometimes I'll teach meditation simply as just allowing yourself to be with your own feelings. It's therapeutic. I teach EFT, the emotional freedom technique, which is a personal development technique. I get put in a context that helps people come to another level. So again, it's fine for what it is. And sometimes, especially if you want to teach or be a healer or a coach or something like that, knowing that sort of thing is extremely useful. So I teach people how to do that. I'm starting a class in June to teach people how to coach with EFT because it is extremely useful. But once it goes from trying to improve myself to questioning who that self is, you've stepped into a new dimension, a higher dimension, and that's the dimension of self-inquiry. And that's where you start down the path of non-duality. The people want to improve their lives. Of course they do. They want to have, more money, better relationships, better health, more opportunities, more creativity. That's perfectly natural for the human being. Everybody says, I want more of this. I want my dream life. I wish to have, right? They can describe in great detail what they wish to have, even meditate on it, even affirm it, and do, visualizations and that sort of stuff. Everybody knows what you were talking about when we say, I want, or I have this dream, or I have, or something like that. Also very clear, right? So we can describe in great detail what we want, but nobody asks, well, it's me, right? What do you mean by me? Nobody asks that. We find that the I is an assumption. It's just, it's a bunch of beliefs that I have, and I've never actually looked. That looking is non-dual inquiry. When you start looking at the I itself, rather than all the things that the I wants, you've moved from personal development into non-duality. And so they can help each other, right? But to be clear, that the highest inquiry, the highest spiritual pursuit is the non-dual inquiry. That is the highest place. Beyond that is the absolute. It is the doorway to the absolute. And all roads, all spiritual practices, all religious practices, personal development, therapy, they all lead to here. They will all eventually lead to here. And I've had many people that I've worked with who have been helping people, therapists. I mean, people with, a lot of degrees and stuff after their name that I've worked with, and they're coming here, right? They're seeing, they're coming to see the bigger picture. And that's what non-duality presents. So satsang is a look into the ultimate path for the human being, the gateless gate, where all things point. Dick says, why do we as human beings get depressed? John says, very clear. Good. Nazareth, thank you. Great satsang. Thank you. Dick, depression is, here's how it happens. It's a state the nervous system gets into in order to cope with just overstimulation, trauma, wounds, all sorts of things. One of the things it does in order to cope or to compensate for deep traumas is it simply shuts down, right? There can be all sorts of different kinds of behaviors that are compensations for deep inner wounds as children, deep traumas. We have a lot of traumatization when we're children. It's inevitable. We're just being ourselves, and the environment slams us in some ways, maybe mildly with just some kind of a diminishment or a scolding, but sometimes abusive, downright. And what happens is the nervous system just gets into this state, right? And it has to function. And so it suppresses a lot of stuff. It buries a lot of stuff. It tries to cut a lot of its nature off so it can present to the environment whatever it needs to present simply to survive, right? And then it gets locked into that state. If that's so contracted that everything it does, it just keeps running into obstacles. It just can't do anything. No avenues feel open to it. It just completely contracts. Just lets all the energy go, and it just kind of sinks into depression, right? Which is even not despair, because despair, there's still energy there. The depression is more like, is just apathetic. It's like, I give up. Of course, you can't give up. You really can't give up. There's something that wants to express itself, but that layer is just so thick. And that's the cause of depression. Now, the way out of depression is to learn how to be with your feelings, is to allow. That's where to simply allow your feelings opens up, creates an inner space where suddenly your feelings are allowable. And of course, they weren't allowable, which is what created the contraction that ended up in depression. So if you start beginning to allow your feelings, even allowing the numbness that is depression, and stop fighting it and pushing it away and the like, and actually be present with it, it sends a very clear message to the nervous system that the environment's changed. Maybe it is okay for a little bit of me to come out. In cases like that, where there's a lot of trauma and depression, I will use the emotional freedom technique. Communicating through touch, that sense of I'm safe. And of course, it was the absence of safety that created the contraction. So what we're going to do is create an atmosphere, an inner environment that is safe. And that is what brings the shift about. You can't force it to happen, right? You can't drug your way out of it. There's nothing you can do except become a safe place. And in the safe place is where the miracles all take place. That's where all healing comes from. So what a great question to end this on. Ava, thank you, my great master, for this wonderful time of remaining in truth. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, GP. For Monday morning, Micah is in Monday morning in Sydney. Yeah, it's late. It's the next day for you guys. Jay says, thanks, G. Glad you do this. Oh, you're very, very welcome. John, you like that? That's my my latest EFT video. Let me put it up there again for you guys, so you guys can watch it. I want everybody to see it. I had a lot of fun making it. And there it is for all of you on YouTube to watch that. And there on the window there is my catalog of all my EFT courses. And I am starting a program in July. I want to get, matter of fact, I'm going to do it regularly. Whenever I get 10 people who want to do it, I'll do the class. So I can give everybody time and the like. Teska says, what is future people plan for? Make promises. I feel I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen next moment. There's possibility of so many things at next moment. So just let come what's coming. Yeah, you don't have to ignore planning, right? I mean, if you're going to go somewhere, you need to make a reservation in advance, right? So we're always just flexible about it, right? Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't know what's going to happen at these satsangs. I just spent a month putting together all these courses on my site, and I have to let go of attachment to it. Will any of them sell? I don't know, right? Right. But you do it anyway. You do what comes, you do what's in front of you, you plan, and then you let it go. Right? You let go of attachment to the results. That allows you to function fully in life, planning, strategies, the whole deal, but with this wonderful flexibility, this wonderful openness, and yes, whatever's going to come. And when you really are free from identity, you are emptiness. Well, then you have the entire universe is available to you to respond to whatever happens in that moment just perfectly. And that perfect response is what people call wisdom. And the one who seems to exude that is what people call a sage, right? But it's just the wisdom appearing because there's no self in the way. There's no self in the way that keeps the wisdom from appearing. There's no filtering. There's nobody there trying to censor it. It's just right from God's mouth to your ears. So sends me to thank you for a great session. We'll pop in for EFT. Good. Teska says, thanks. You're very welcome. Sophie, love and gratitude. John, same to you, my friend. That's it for you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just love doing this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting this work. Thanks for everything you're doing. Love you all. Namaste.